Hello, and on behalf of the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston, thank you for tuning into our program, providing an update on our collective progress towards environmental sustainability and lessons learned over these past several weeks. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more programming. Our expert speaker today is Dr. Andrew Steer, President and CEO of the World Resources Institute, a global research interaction organization dedicated to promoting economic development while protecting the natural environment. Dr. Steer joined the Institute from the World Bank, where he served as Special Envoy for climate change from 2010 to 2012. Andrew, thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Basma.
To begin, could you share your assessment on the world shifting towards a more sustainable pathway over the last decade or two? What are the current projections for emissions, biodiversity, and other indicators such as deforestation and ocean health? And what do these mean for the ability to shift towards sustainability?
In some areas we've done well, and in many others we haven't. Think of the ozone hole. We used to be so worried about ozone and the skin cancer we could get, and the world came together with the corporate sector, and we haven't exactly fully solved it, but it's on the way to being solved. So too, many of our rivers are much cleaner. The air we breathe in some cities is better than it used to be. So we've done some things well, and other things we simply haven't been able to get our act together. So for example, if you look at biodiversity, we are losing biodiversity, the number of species, at a rate that is totally unprecedented in world history. Something like 1,000 times the rate that would be the natural rate of biodiversity loss. So too on the forests. I mean, last year we lost an area the size of Belgium of tropical forests. Dreadful loss. Included there, of course, is all of the ecosystem services that those forests provide in creating the weather, creating oxygen, managing water, being the home to species and so on. That's all lost. The oceans also are deteriorating really badly. By 2040, there will be probably more plastic in the world than there will be fish in terms of the volume, so to speak. And we have great dead zones in the ocean right now. And so too on climate change. I mean, we have a global deal on climate, but we are nowhere near heading in the right direction. We are still increasing the carbon emissions year by year, although this year will be an exception because the world economy has sort of flattened, and so this year actually carbon emissions will fall, but we're still increasing it when we actually need to halve carbon emissions by 2030, and we need to halve them again by 2040. And this, of course, will be a great revolution that we need to go through, but we are not going through it yet. So whilst there are positive things going on, there are also negative things. The negative things in and of themselves can come from positive things. So for example, I mean, in the last 100 years, the size of the world economy grew 20-fold. Now, it was 20 times bigger at the end of the 20th century than at the beginning. And in this century, if the world economy keeps growing in real terms at 3% a year, that will be another 20-fold increase. So you think about from 1990 to 2100, 20 times, 20 times, that's a 400 times increase in the amount of sort of human economic activity. And a lot of that has done wonderful things. I mean, we've never ever had the reduction in poverty that we've enjoyed in the last quarter century. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Every year people are brought out of poverty because of better jobs, rising economy. Now this year's a great sadness because we'll see poverty rates rising a lot again. So it's just this, think of a sort of a tsunami, if you like, of economic activity just growing and growing and growing. So despite the best efforts to protect the forests and protect the climate, it's just overwhelmed. So we need a new way of doing business.
Thank you. And Andrew, could you update us on key new technologies and innovations that are supplementing our progress towards sustainability?
Well, technological advance has been helping us a lot in certain areas. I think everybody understands that, for example, renewable energy. If you looked at the price of renewable energy 45 years ago, and if that was the price of $100 to create a certain amount of electricity from solar, it would now be something like 20 cents. So it's fallen by 99.8%. That's the speed at which costs have fallen. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. We're seeing that now with battery storage, where costs are falling also very greatly. So in the energy sector, we're seeing some remarkable changes, including in sort of smart grids and so on. But there are bigger changes in the works as well. For example, the so-called hydrogen economy is going to be extremely important. With the right sunshine and the right water and the right technology, you can generate hydrogen. Hydrogen then in turn can store energy. Hydrogen can fuel everything from airplanes to other forms of industrial and transportation. So there are new technologies in the works, but many of the technologies are not very sort of sophisticated. Sometimes it's a matter of just behaving differently. So, for example, one of the greatest investments in the world right now is in landscape restoration. There's something like 2 billion hectares in the world that used to be foreign. How much is 2 billion hectares? It's like twice the size of China. It's huge. I mean, it used to be forest. Now, basically, it's really nothing, and it's everywhere. It exists in America. It exists hugely in Africa and Latin America. All over the world, this is distributed land that essentially has no productive use. We now know how to make that become productive again. And it can help. We can bring carbon down from the sky to the earth in the form of trees and bushes and crops and soil. That's all bringing carbon down to the earth, and that can create more agricultural yields. It can help reduce poverty. It can make those yields more resilient to drought and so on. It can help food security. So these are simple technologies, and those are just as important as the sophisticated ones, if you like. So in every area of economic activity, there are new technologies, and many of these. Many of them are developed obviously by the private sector, by the research sector, by universities, but many of them also are prompted by government policy. So the reason that solar energy has come down so much is because governments around the world, especially in Europe, increasingly it's been in China too, and a little bit here in the United States, policies have said, look, we want you to invest more in this, and that has then cause those costs to come down.
Thank you, Andrew. Considering the world is in the worst health and economic climate in a century, do we have time to worry about climate and sustainability right now?
Well, this is an excellent question. I mean, the world has never had a crisis like this before. We've never had a health crisis like this before. At least not in modern times. We certainly had the Black Death and all kinds of things in the old days, but the combination of this pandemic and the economic collapse that it has caused because of the policies of social distancing and lockdown that we've never had an economic crisis like this for 100 years. I mean, it was in 1929 that the last time something like this happened.
Right.
And so what you could say is, really, I mean, my goodness me, we've got too much on our hands right now. How could we possibly worry about climate change? I mean, that's something in the long term. I mean, maybe we'll do that tomorrow, but today we've got to focus on health, and we've got to focus on getting the economy back again. I think this is misspecifying the issue. We are about to spend between 10 and $20 trillion in the world to reflate, to reboot, and to rebuild our economies. Right. And the question is, what do we spend it on? We could simply build back the same unequal, non-inclusive, risky, high carbon economy we did before, or we could aim those funds at the economy of the future. If you want to create jobs, which obviously we do because we have this massive recession or depression, you should be investing in the places where the jobs exist. We know now that at least there are 5 times as many jobs in renewable energy, especially by, I should say, green energy, which includes energy efficiency, it includes building codes, it includes a whole range of issues. So there's at least 5 times as many jobs in that, and we need to invest in those. That would be the smart thing to do economically, regardless of the climate. And so too, I mean, the current crisis has reminded us that that we are much more vulnerable than we thought, that the world is much riskier than we thought. We honestly believed that we were safe. We honestly believed that governments would protect us from something like a pandemic, but they didn't. We are hopelessly ill-equipped to deal with this, and so we need to build back an economy that is resilient. We need to think differently about the future. We've built our planning for the future on the assumption that the past is the best model, and actually that's no longer valid. And so whilst yes, we need to focus on health first, the economy, we can do that better if we also think about the future economy and the future of our health.
Thank you. Certainly, there are many variables and considerations moving forward. But speaking of this current crisis, it's obvious COVID-19 and the decrease in daily human activity has had an impact on Earth's environment. Could you share with us, what phenomena have resulted from this change in our behavior?
Well, this year, of course, because there's so little economic activity, we are seeing a healthiness in the air that we haven't seen before. There have been calculations for China that suggest that actually more lives were saved by cleaner air than were lost due to the pandemic. Now that's not a good trade-off, by the way. So I'm certainly not saying that we should look at the current situation and say, aha, this is the solution to our environmental problems. It certainly isn't. This is a very, very bad thing that's happening. The good news is that you can have air that's as clean as today, water that's as clean as today. You can have reduced carbon emissions. And by the way, you can grow your economy. You can enjoy more prosperity. That's the real sort of intellectual breakthrough that has occurred in the last few years. There's an organization that we at the World Resources Institute manage called the Global Commission on the Economy and Climate. And what that does, it asks the question, is it possible to go from today's high carbon, low efficiency world economy to tomorrow's high efficiency, low carbon world economy? Is there a way that can actually generate more jobs and more prosperity and better health along the way? And it turns out that the best economists in the world are now saying, yes, they're doing research, and they're showing that actually if you really act smartly on a subject like climate change or on environment more generally, you will have a more efficient economy, because you'll use resources more efficiently, because that's what environmental damage is when you use resources inefficiently. So pollution is a sign of excessive use of energy, for example, and inefficient burning of energy. That's what causes the pollution, if you like. And so first, smart environmental policies lead to more economic efficiency. Second, they drive those technologies we were talking about earlier. They drive down costs. And everybody that studied economic growth theory in undergraduate or graduate knows that the only solution for long-term economic growth is technological progress. Environmental policies can drive that. And a third thing that environmental policies do is that they lower risk. Especially climate change policies, because at the moment there's huge risks. People don't know where we're heading, but they do know it's going to be risky. If you address climate change, you lower risk, and as you lower risk, investors are willing to invest more. So if you take those three things together, efficiency, technology, and reduction of risk, you get a very, very favorable sort of cocktail of elements that can promote more jobs, more technology, more competitiveness, better trade, winning the trade wars sort of thing. And this is a really important intellectual revolution that has taken place.
Thank you, Andrew. Certainly like your analogies.
Mm.
Now, expanding on this subject, lastly, what are the specific lessons learned from these phenomena, and how can we reflect on this pandemic's environmental impact to shape our future behavior and goals as the public and for companies and organizations?
Well, this is, I mean, I think a fascinating issue. At the World Resources Institute, we had a board meeting last week, and we have some very wonderful board members from all over the world. And we asked the question, you know, do you think that this current crisis is going to open the door to new ways of doing business? Or are we just going to go back to normal? So, for example, when we had the world recession, remember 10 years ago, between 2008, 2010, basically we put things together again. We injected lots of money, and we sort of rebuilt the old way. We didn't really change at all.
Right.
We built back the same world that had caused the problem in the first place. And the question is, this time, could it be different? And our board members, who are very distinguished people, they're CEOs of corporations, they're ex-heads of state and so on, they were unanimous. I mean, they said, yes, this is going to open the door to change. Why? Because number one, people realize we are vulnerable. And that we cannot keep on planning the future on those straight lines and smooth curves. We are going to have to think about the future differently. We're going to have to think about risk differently, and we're going to be willing to change things. Second, there may be a willingness to really sort of, if you like, reset the social contract between governments and corporations and citizens. Just as, after World War I in Europe, I mean, total resetting of the social contract. After World War II, also. Actually, after the Great Depression in America, a resetting of the social contract, change in the role of government, a change in the role of citizens and corporations and so on. And so the question is this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reset that social contract? And certainly our board members believed, yes, that is the case. What does that mean? It means that probably, if you say, will the world be more globalized? Probably not. Probably the world will be a little less globalized, because the entire sort of modern economic system was based upon, incredible supply chains across multiple countries, just in time kind of logistics. That works very well when you're in equilibrium, when you can trust the ships to come on time, you can trust everything to work. But we now live in a world where you can't trust, there are going to be shocks to the system. So probably we will move less of a globalized trading system. And that may encourage us to move more to a circular economy, a little more what's called onshoring rather than offshoring. So that will have some impact. But the more important question is, what will it do to the global cooperation? I mean, this pandemic has been unbelievably eye-opening in terms of the lack of ability to operate as a global community. I mean, there was a time in the last decade, in 2015, when we had the Paris climate deal, we had the Sustainable Development Goals. All the countries in the world, including the United States, signed up to both of them. Every country said, we have a common future, we have a common approach. And since then, we've given that up. And this pandemic has been sort of quite tragic in terms of the lack of global cooperation, just as it has been inspiring in terms of local citizen cooperation. I mean, in most pandemics through history, illness has pushed people apart. This actually pandemic has, whether it's in the streets of Milan where people are singing from their balconies, whether it's the people in New York applauding the doctors and so on. I mean, there's been a wonderful coming together. But internationally, that hasn't happened. And obviously, the United States has chosen very actively to not be a leader in this space at the moment. and you know, that's obviously profoundly disappointing. What does it imply for the future? I think it depends upon the American citizens. Do they or do they not want to play the role that they have played for the last 80 years? What is clear is that other parts of the world do want to operate in a more collective way, and I mean, we just have to hope and pray that we are able to do that, because global problems require global solutions, whether they're pandemics, whether it's the drug trade, whether it's terrorism, or whether it's climate change. We need global action.
Absolutely. Andrew, thank you very much for your time. This has certainly been very helpful, putting into perspective, you know, how huge our impact is and how much we need to improve to reach our sustainability goals.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, let me just say, I've seen what the Houston World Affairs Council does. It's deeply impressive, and it's a great honor to be with you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Great.
And to those watching, thank you for your interest, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. And have a wonderful day.